All right, first up from the Black Information Network, Indiana Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith is under fire after calling the Three-Fifths Compromise a great move. On Friday, April 25th, Beckwith shared a video on X where he discussed the Three-Fifths Compromise, a former clause in the U.S. Constitution that counted enslaved people as three-fifths of a person for representation and taxation. Beckwith claimed the cause was a great move. Quote, "This was a great move by the North to make sure that slavery would be eradicated in our nation. They knew what they were doing," unquote. It goes on to say, "That's why you had the Senate Democrats who were getting up talking about the Three-Fifths Compromise like it was some sort of terrible thing in our past. It was not. It actually was the exact opposite that helped to root out slavery and lead us into a more perfect union that we now see, where black, white, red, brown, all people can have equal representation under the law." So, I want to go first. Normally, I'd throw to you after I'd already done some reading, but I want to go first here if I can. You wouldn't be mad at me, right, Q?
Absolutely not.
Okay, all right. Because I want to say this and then hear your response to what I'm about to say. So, who's this guy? What's his name? Beckwith. Okay, so Beckwith. I want to say that I'm grateful in moments like these and right now in particular because of Dr. Camilla Westenberg. Because of that, I know that because of her, I know that the Three-Fifths Compromise took place. I couldn't tell you the year, but I know it was in the 1700s. And it wasn't until effectively a lifetime later that slaves were granted their freedom. And so call it maybe 80 years, 90 years, give or take. There's a huge gap in between this Three-Fifths Compromise and when slaves actually are free. So him connecting those two as though somehow the Three-Fifths Compromise had something to do with the slaves getting free and America overcoming its great sin. That had nothing to, like, imagine how long 90 years is. Okay, so that's first. So I'm glad that I was taught American history, or what many folks might call critical race theory. I'm glad I was taught that because I don't make stupid statements like this when it comes to the history of our country. Now, add to that not everybody has to know all the intricacies. I get it. A lot of that stuff is not important to our day-to-day lives. It's something that we need to be reasonably aware of, which, to be fair, I'm reasonably aware of, a lot of things from our history, but I don't know everything. But one of the things we like to say on the show, of course, is that Google is free. And before you talk about something that's so controversial, it makes sense to just kind of make sure you at least have a general idea of what was going on in the country, a general timeline, that sort of thing, right? And I'm not going to say that this guy Beckwith should be perfect because Lord knows I'm not perfect. You know what I mean? Even with research and whatever, there's things that I miss, and there are perspectives that get introduced that I have to take into account. However, I think that what this guy is doing really overlooks why the Three-Fifths Compromise is so insulting to black people in this country. And for him to try to spin it as though it's a good thing, it shows a very narrow-minded, one-sided, and unfortunately, because I don't think he would say this about himself, but unfortunately it shows a very racist, self-centered, arrogant, white supremacist view, revisionist view of history. And I know that's not what he's going for. And, this guy doesn't care about anybody's opinions but his own. But for everyone else who recognizes that we need to respect each other, we need to honor each other where we are, we need to teach each other how to love each other, I will provide some clarity here. Now, I don't speak for all black people, but I think I have a general idea. The Three-Fifths Compromise, as you may or may not know, said that for the purposes of population and the census and so forth, and representation ultimately in the government, that black people will only count as 3/5 of a human being, as a vote, as representation, right? Now, prior to that, it was one person was equal to, one representative, or one person could be counted for one representative. But if you were black, you were, 2/5 of your humanity were eradicated, right? So just that language and that mathematics by itself is insulting. But let's say, for instance, that you say, hey, you know what? This was a compromise. This was what they had to do. Black people couldn't vote, but they still kind of inhabited the land. And, this wasn't meant to be insulting. Get out of your feelings. It happened. Let's move on, right? Let's say you're one of those folks, which, to be fair, a lot of people that I'm sure look and think the way that this, what's his name again? Beckwith thinks, might feel that way. I want to introduce this to you, that the 3/5 compromise was reached because this country was trying to appease the South and their ideologies and their determination to perpetuate the institution of slavery. And again, if you are a black person, where there's a piece of legislation written into this country's laws that's specifically about you, to appease your immediate oppressor and all the industries associated with that institution of slavery, to appease those folks, that also says you are worth 3/5 of a human being. And it doesn't even matter what category, representation or otherwise. I'd argue that black people are the fullest human beings. I'd argue that hair looks like my hair, and straight hair is the hair that looks different, that needs its own classification. I'd argue that skin color looks like my skin color, because indeed the very first Homo sapiens sapiens look like me. They came out of Africa. That is scientific, that is verifiable. So when we go back and we look at history without a revisionist view, with a dispassionate view, you can make those arguments. And then you see kind of the white supremacy, you see the offensive elements kind of on their surface. So when I look at someone like this going back and he doubled down on it, and I'll spare you the details of that. This guy's like, oh no, I'm right. And everybody, you guys have got the woke mind virus. No, we're educated, man. We just know what happened. And this is offensive. If someone said this about you to your people, and they empowered your oppressors with this legislation, and it's written into the history books, you wouldn't look favorably on that. And then you trying to do some mathematical magic to try to suggest somehow that this is what led us to a more perfect union is asinine. So that's my 2 cents. I wanted to go first because, I remember when Chris sent this over, I was like, oh, I just don't like that one. But anyway, your thoughts, Q.
So first, before responding, critical race theory is an academic framework primarily used in law and related fields. It examines how race and racism have shaped legal systems and institutions in the United States. It posits that racism is not just a result of individual bias, but also a systemic phenomenon embedded in laws, policies, and practices. CRT also highlights the role of power dynamics and the concept of intersectionality, the way different forms of inequality intersect, and understanding racial inequality. Again, critical race theory is an academic framework primarily used in law. Mm-hmm. Important to say that out loud, because sometimes we unintentionally conflate what the right has kind of reworked and rebranded as critical race theory, and then we use it as an antonym the way that they meant it, giving it credence the way that they meant it.
Yeah.
So critical race theory as an antonym and or synonym of American history is an improper way to use it. And I don't want us to do that, because it's the same thing we allowed them to do with woke. It's the same thing we allow them to do with DEI. They turn these things that mean something. They have a scholastic, literal meaning that means something completely different than the way the right rebrands it. And then we make it an antonym of something.
Yeah, we validate it
as, and then we validate it by doing that. So to not want us to even start our argument by positioning CRT as a placeholder for American history in that argument,
Mm-hmm.
flatly, CRT has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And we said it, and it would give our listener who might not know, because a lot of people heard that term for the first time because some right wing person that co opted it was saying it in the way that they meant it. And too many people have now accepted that as what it means. Well, we don't want our kids being taught CRT in elementary
No
school.
kid has ever
That's
been
never
taught
happened
CRT.
ever. That's never happened ever.
Yeah.
In any pre-post grad education scholastic environment, have children ever been taught CRT? So important for us to say that out loud before we even move on. Secondly, listeners can't see my face.
I can see it.
You really gonna plan our face like that?
Yeah, man.
Like, I don't even, you said it all, but I wish my face could be audible.
Yeah.
That's just playing in our and everybody else's face.
Yeah, I know.
But they've gotten really bold about playing like that because they realize they can get it off.
Yeah.
They realize that they're not going to get any pushback. They realize they have a whole segment of the population that believes everything that they say, won't fact check, won't do any background information or research on their own. It's a really, really sad thing. They keep trying to tell us how we benefited from slavery. And I wish we could laugh it off as ridiculous, except so much credence and merit have been given to these really ridiculous arguments that right wingers are starting to make with regards to American history and the role that we played in it, and the role that slavery and oppression and segregation and Jim Crow and redlining and all these things played, and what is still the truth for Black Americans today. Yeah, man, Ramses said it all. I'm just trying to articulate my facial expression.
Well, then there's no sense in breathing any more oxygen into that story. Sometimes elected officials, they, I want to say they mean well, but I can't even say that, especially not for this guy. I can't say that he means well. I'm sure he thinks that he does, but
he doesn't mean well. You can say
he thinks he means well. I'll say it this way. I think he thinks that he means well for the people that voted for him. That's what I'll say. But because nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks I'm the bad guy. That's what I'm trying to say. But we have to hold people accountable. We have to make sure that our perspective and our voices are heard, because I know that on this show and all the shows that we do, we're often introducing perspectives that many people hadn't considered. And, I mean, I haven't shared with you because I took a look at our inbox, but we have tons of I wouldn't call them like fan letters, but, just listeners saying like, hey, listen, I listen casually here and there. You guys are not really my cup of tea, but, I just try to keep my news intake well-rounded, and you guys hit an interesting point, or, hey, I appreciate this episode. You did this, or this interview you had. So
important thing to say before we move on.
What's up?
He's either not an intelligent person or he doesn't mean well.
Or both. I mean,
both can't be true.
Oh, you don't think so?
He can't be intelligent and mean well and say that.
Well, I was thinking he was unintelligent and didn't mean well. So that's the
no, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
no, but we gave him a few minutes ago a little bit of a benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
That maybe he meant well to the people that voted for him. If that's the case, then he's an unintelligent, unserious person.
There you go. Okay, I go with that. Yeah. Okay.